Every year, there are a handful of movies that I see and I like well enough, or at least find interesting enough that I want to talk about them, but not quite enough to justify a full 10 or 15-minute breakdown on this channel. They're the films that didn't spark a whole essay in my brain, but they still deserve a little space, a little bit of attention, a little moment in the spotlight. So today, I'm doing part two of this kind of rapid fire roundup. Quick thoughts on some of the 2025 releases that I never got around to covering in depth on the channel. Think of this as a catch-up session, all the movies that slipped through the cracks gathered up into one place. This is part two of what I'm calling I Saw These. I promise you can check out part one right now. It is available to watch, where I talk about a whole bunch of movies, including Together and Highest to Lowest and The Toxic Avenger. But anyway, let's get into part two. Damn, this movie hit me like a truck. This film is dreadful, meaning it's full of dread. When the first gun goes off in this movie, I could feel the collective eyes widen in my theater like, oh, fuck. So they're just going there, aren't they? And by God, that brutality never lets up from that moment on. This film is brutal, it is bleak, it is a bummer, and that near constant tension, that total unpredictability left me uncomfortable for the entire runtime, which is a feature, not a bug. The way this film makes you immediately want all of these young men to survive and immediately assures you that that will not happen creates such an atmosphere of panicked anticipation for the worst. You don't know when it will happen, but you do know that it will. And sitting with that feeling was truly a unique cinema experience, and not exactly one I'm clamoring to relive anytime soon. Add to it the timeliness of this story and how it can feel like we're in a world inching toward this reality, and what you have is a deeply effective, nauseatingly harrowing film that could easily be put up there with the all-time Stephen King adaptations. And add to all of this the powerhouse performances at the center from Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson, and you get a rare depiction of brotherhood and male bonding and empathy amidst all of the chaos. The ending of this film threw me for a loop and confounded me as I left the theater, but after having time to sit and wallow in my emotions, I think I appreciate it for what it is. Unlike a lot of people I see online, I think I would have liked maybe another 5 to 10 more minutes to fully explore this world, to explore the repercussions of the final decision. But at the end of the day, this was way better than I was expecting it to be. Okay, I know these are supposed to be quick reviews, but I have a huge rant incoming about this movie. This movie is frustrating in that very specific way where you could feel your own creative ego getting a little bruised while you're watching it. Let me start here. I think a lot of creatives, writers, filmmakers, artists are going to be irritated by Anemone because it's the kind of movie that a lot of us have already written in some form or another. It's the kind of movie that feels genetically engineered to bruise the ego of every creative person with daddy issues and a notes app full of half-finished screenplay ideas about it. You know what I mean. Don't lie. Children of divorce who now live in Bushwick or Williamsburg sipping matcha lattes while fine-tuning a short story called Inheritance or some shit. Every generation of artists rediscovers the idea that reckoning with your father is somehow profound, as if they're the first to ever realize, hey, maybe my dad messed me up. And I say this with full self-awareness because I'm absolutely one of them. Just another adult child of divorce, hunched over a MacBook, watching Ronan Day-Lewis make the exact movie that I've been quietly workshopping in my head for the last decade. Because I've written those scripts. Actually, in fact, I've written a whole book about my relationship with my father, and I know I'm not alone. Writing about the ways our parents shaped or failed us, it's practically its own genre at this point. At its core, Anemone is about a family ruptured by abandonment. A father walks out on his wife and young son for reasons no one fully understands. 16 years later, the boy's uncle, who stepped in as a father figure, sets out to find this man, now living in isolation deep in the woods, and convince him to come back home before the boy's life fully derails. So, yes, it's about fathers and sons, but also about brothers, about the lineage of damage that runs through a family like a fault line. There's a lot of heavy family drama dialogue in this movie. A teenager resenting his absent father, father labeled a coward, everyone's circling the same emotional drain. And I think what makes the movie frustrating, especially for people like me, is that so many of us have told this exact story in our own heads, on our own laptops, and we'll probably never get to make our version of it. But Ronan Day-Lewis got to because he's Daniel Day-Lewis's son. And that's the thing, right? This movie exists primarily because of that lineage. And That's not even an insult, just a fact that hovers over every frame of this movie. It's a film that's structurally unconventional, formally experimental, deliberately opaque. The first 20 minutes are practically a silent film, all atmosphere, no exposition. It breaks all the rules of screenwriting, rules that all of us serfs at the bottom are told we must adhere to if we want that one in a million shot at making our debut. Here, you're just kind of floating through it, trying to piece together what's happening until finally some dialogue kicks in that doesn't tell you much more than you've already inferred. It's very much a tone poem kind of film, which makes sense when you learn that Ronan Day Lewis is a visual artist and painter. It's his feature debut, and formally, it's interesting. But it's also the kind of movie that would never get made if its director's last name wasn't Day Lewis. And that's where the irritation really creeps in because if any of us, the nameless writers, the emerging filmmakers, pitched this same movie to a studio, we'd be laughed out of the room. It's too slow, it's too meandering, it's too opaque, which, yeah, it is all those things. I kept getting the sense that Ronan's direction note for every scene was something like, okay, for this one, I want you to walk across the room, but do it at like 10% speed. And I know it's supposed to be meditative, deliberate, all that. But there's a difference between slow burn and slow motion. So, yes, nepotism is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here, and that awareness colored my experience the entire time because formally it's ambitious, but narratively it's kind of elementary, especially when you've seen or literally written variations of this story before. And you know what? There's also subplots about the family's military heritage, about the troubles in Northern Ireland. There are mentions of priests, legacy, guilt, all this inherited trauma folded into the story. And I'll be honest, I was trying to piece together the historical and emotional connections, but I just couldn't hold on to it. The movie gives you so much time to think that my brain started to wander off. Visually, though, this movie's pretty stunning. The cinematography is gorgeous. There are shots in the movie that could hang in a gallery. Problem is that you're so aware of how beautifully boring it all is. There are these long dolly shots, trees swaying, waves lapping, characters staring pensively at water. It's all so vibe forward that the actual emotional core gets a little blurry. All that said, this movie does contain exactly two scenes that absolutely floored me. Easily among my favorite moments in any film this year. Both are built around Daniel Day-Lewis delivering monologues that remind you exactly why he's in that untouchable greatest actor alive conversation. It's him doing what he does best, completely disappearing into a character and wringing every last ounce of emotion from a page of dialogue like it's holy scripture. He acts the absolute shit out of these scenes. They're long, they're deliberate, they're hypnotic, so much so that everything else in the movie fades into static. You're just sitting there, eyes glued to the screen, watching a man who's already a living legend somehow prove it again in real time. Honestly, the entire film could have been built around those moments, and maybe it should have been, because for those few minutes, Anemone feels electric. It feels alive and impossible to look away from. But it does also feel like someone built an entire house just to show off two beautiful windows. Outside of those monologues, there's almost no tension. The first act, especially, feels so inert. The score hums and drones. The camera creeps forward like it's waiting for something to happen that never does. It's a movie that's more interested in vibes than movement. And look, part of my frustration is personal. You probably already got that by now. Like I said, I went into this already knowing it was a father-son collaboration, already aware that the film likely exists because of who its makers are, and that's fine. I actually find that aspect kind of fascinating as well, but it also triggered this little creative jealousy in me that I just couldn't shake. Because, yeah, this bored me on a thematic level and on a practical watchability level. It bored me despite Daniel Day-Lewis giving yet another masterclass in acting. His performance alone might earn him awards nominations, and rightfully so, but that performance lives inside a movie that, to me, never quite justifies its own existence. I can't say that I hated it. I can't even say it's bad. It's just not something I feel compelled to revisit. I keep asking myself, do I dislike Anemone because of what it represents? Because it's proof that nepotism continues to shape who gets to make personal art? Or do I dislike it because it didn't move me? The answer is probably both. And yet, I can't dismiss the beauty of the project itself. A father and son making something together, that's meaningful. That's emotional. It's art as a bridge, and I admire that genuinely. I don't know how autobiographical this film is, but you could feel the weight of their shared history humming beneath this film. You could sense Daniel Day-Lewis working something out, maybe even guilt, maybe reflection, and maybe Ronan too, finding his voice through his father's silence. That's the part I respect. The emotional risk of collaboration between two generations of artists. It's just unfortunate that so many of us would love to have that same opportunity, that same space to make something messy and personal and indulgent, but we never will because our parents aren't Oscar winners. So, yeah, Anemone isn't for everyone. It's barely for me. It's beautifully made, intermittently brilliant, and sometimes excruciating to sit through. But those monologues, those are the reason to see it because, god damn, can Daniel Day Lewis act his ass off. I've been a fan of Derek Cianfrance for a long time. I first saw The Place Beyond the Pines back in high school, and I remember being struck by his naturalism, the gritty realism, and that sort of unsettling authenticity he brings to every frame. His films always feel like they're bordering on documentary. When you watch something as emotionally brutal as Blue Valentine, you start to wonder what Derek Cianfrance must see in the world because his filmmaking is so grounded and so aware of how bleak and fragile life can be. And then he made this miniseries called I Know This Much to Be True with Mark Ruffalo, which I remember less in terms of plot and more in terms of impact. It was punishing, heavy, emotionally pulverizing, and Ruffalo gives maybe his best performance of his career in it. That show is just a continuation of that signature Derek Cianfrance style. I highly recommend people watch it. And it's funny because when people talk about auteurs, the conversation always goes to the loud ones. Tarantino, Spike Lee, Scorsese, Wes Anderson, PTA. But I genuinely think Derek Cianfrance is one of those quieter auteurs who has a very distinct and consistent voice. Blue Valentine, The Place Beyond the Pines, I Know This Much Is True, his producing work on Sound of Metal, there's a clear through line. And with Roofman, you could feel that same vision, even though this is undeniably a more mainstream film. That in itself is interesting. We're in this era where these very specific, stylistically defined filmmakers are taking on what looks to be more traditional studio films, whether it's to fund passion projects or just to try something new. Chloe Zhao doing Eternals, Bong Joon-ho doing Mickey 17, Darren Aronofsky making Caught Stealing, which honestly doesn't even feel like an Aronofsky movie at all. You could hear me talk about that in part one. Even David Fincher making a sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is a sentence that would have sounded like a joke a few years ago. The difference is that Roofman still feels like a Derek Cianfrance film. It's romantic drama meets crime caper meets grounded Americana, which are genres that he's sort of associated with, but he blends them to his style instead of disappearing into them. The emotional core here is the romance. The whole film hangs on the tension of knowing that Channing Tatum's character, Jeff, is digging himself deeper and deeper into a situation that cannot possibly end well. He breaks out of prison, he hides out. He could have kept his head down and slipped away, but instead, he catches feelings. That early spark of a crush becomes a full on relationship, and you find yourself wanting him to get away with it, even as every new decision he makes is objectively terrible. This sort of fits into that lineage of what I'd call the lovable criminal story. Legally, what Jeff is doing is wrong. He's robbing fast food restaurants, terrifying workers, committing federal crimes, but Derek Cianfrance paints him as someone who never wants to harm anyone. In the opening robbery scene, he politely asks the workers to go into the freezer, and when one of them says that they don't have a jacket, he literally gives them his. He's constantly described as a nice guy. He has a family, a daughter, twin baby sons, and in his mind, this is how he provides. It reminded me a lot of Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon. Al Pacino's character Sonny is also a man in way over his head doing something illegal for a reason that feels emotionally justifiable. There's that same tension watching someone unravel but still rooting for them. The film also gave me shades of Uncut Gems in the sense of watching someone make bad decision after bad decision and being unable to look away from it. And surprisingly, it's pretty funny too. A lot of the comedic beats were spoiled in the trailer, but even the jokes I knew were coming still landed harder in context. The crowd I saw it with was laughing loudly, like when Channing Tatum is running bare ass through the store, and then just dead silent during the dramatic moments, like the Thanksgiving feast in the church. You could feel the shift as the movie kept going. And speaking of rooting for people, Channing Tatum and Kirsten Dunst are incredible in this, maybe even career best territory. Channing Tatum's career has always been fascinating because I think a lot of people see him as like the guy from Step Up or 21 Jump Street. But the first time I realized he had something more to offer was in a film called A Guide to Recognizing Your Saints, directed by Dido Montiel, one of the most underrated films of the early 2000s. He was raw in this one, vulnerable, angry, but deeply human. And then he went through the whole blockbuster phase, G.I. Joe, Dear John, White House Down. But every so often he hits you with something like Foxcatcher or Logan Lucky or even Hail Caesar that reminds you that he is capable of really great character work. Kirsten Dunst is the same. People remember Spider-Man or Bring It On, but she's had this long, deeply varied career. Melancholia, Civil War, The Virgin Suicides, and here she's giving maybe the most subtle human performance I've ever seen her give. Their chemistry is ridiculous. You believe this relationship, which is crucial because the entire emotional arc hangs on that believability. The ending of this film, without spoiling it, hits pretty hard. It's tragic, but in that Derek Cianfrance way, where tragedy and tenderness sort of coexist. It's a film about a man looking for purpose after returning from military service, a man who doesn't know how to exist in normal life and funnels his skills into crime because it's the only thing that makes sense to him. If I have one critique of this film, it's that it sometimes goes a little too far in making Jeff seem almost supernaturally capable. Like he has this heightened pattern recognition and tactical genius that borders on superhero territory. I think it would have been more effective to just let him be a competent, desperate man rather than a criminal savant. Competence doesn't really need to be mythologized to be compelling on screen. But beyond that, I was glued to this movie. There's this extended stretch where he becomes a surrogate father to Kirsten Dunst's daughters, and it's weirdly warm and tender considering this man is literally a fugitive living inside of a toy store. You want this accidental family to work. You want them to ride off into the sunset, even though you know that's not how life or a Derek Cianfrance film works. The supporting cast is excellent. Peter Dinklage is nasty and perfect as the Toys R Us manager. Lakeith Stanfield shows up as an old army buddy. Ben Mendelsohn plays this surprisingly moving pastor character. Everyone in this movie adds something. And the film does something smart at the end. During the credits, it plays real news footage from when this actually happened. Interviews with the real people involved, including the woman that Kirsten Dunst is portraying and the pastor that Ben Mendelsohn's character is based on. It forces you to sit there and go, okay, so this really happened. Maybe not beat for beat, but enough that it sticks with you. It gives you that feeling of, wow, the world is stranger than fiction and full of stories just waiting to be turned into movies. All in all, Derek Cianfrance is a filmmaker with a deeply human touch, and Roofman proves he can step into more crowd-pleasing territory without sacrificing his identity. And honestly, that might be the highest compliment I can give any director like him. That's going to do it for part 2 of these quick reviews of movies I didn't get to talk about from 2025 on the channel. Let me know what you thought of any of these movies if you've seen them down in the comments. Was I too harsh on Anemone? Maybe. Maybe I wasn't harsh enough. You let me know down in the comments. When you're done down there, don't forget to like this video, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell to be notified when new videos come out on the channel. And then you can follow me over on Letterboxd so you can see what I'm watching when I'm watching it. Part 3 of this series should be coming out shortly, and I hope to see you all there.